You know, George Orwell's 1984, it's not just some classic novel you read in school, right? It's practically woven into how we talk about politics. I mean, think about it. Terms like Big Brother, Newspeak, thought crime, they're everywhere. We use them all the time, maybe without even thinking about where they came from. But the book is so much more than just a list of catchphrases. It's this incredibly sharp breakdown of how tyranny really works. And in this explainer, we're going to dig into why this anatomy of a nightmare feels, well, more real than ever.
So that brings us right to the core question, doesn't it? How is it possible that a book written almost 75 years ago by a man who was literally dying on this remote Scottish island right after World War II, how does that still hit so hard, so deep in our super-connected, tech-filled world of 2026? It's kind of wild when you think about it. And to really get the answer, we can't start with the book. We've got to start with the man who wrote it.
All right, so first things first. Before there was the famous George Orwell, there was a man named Eric Blair. And that's key, because the absolute horrors you read about in Oceania, well, they weren't just something he dreamed up. No, they were forged in the fire of his own life. So you can really boil it down to three key experiences that made him who he was. First up, his time as an imperial policeman in Burma. That's where he saw, up close, how these massive, oppressive systems just crushed the humanity out of everyone involved. Not just the people being ruled, but the rulers too. Then he spent years living in poverty, I mean real poverty, in places like London and Paris. That experience gave him this deep understanding of the working class, the people he would later call the proles, and it really cemented his belief in democratic socialism. But the real game changer, the crucial turning point, was the Spanish Civil War. That's where he witnessed Soviet-backed forces rewriting history as it was happening. And that's when it clicked for him. This wasn't about left versus right. Totalitarianism was a human problem, a problem with power itself.
In this quote right here from his essay about that time in Burma, it just nails it. He realized that the person in charge, the oppressor, becomes this empty shell, just a puppet playing a part. You lose your own soul in the process. And that feeling, that exact internal struggle, that is the seed for our main character, Winston Smith.
Okay, so with that context on the man himself, let's dive into the world he built. Because you can't really appreciate Winston's tiny sparks of rebellion until you understand the massive, soul-crushing machine he's up against.
Oceania's society is basically this super strict pyramid. At the very tippy top, you've got the inner party. That's just 2% of the population. Think of them as the masterminds, the ones pulling all the strings. They have all the power, and they get little perks, like, being able to turn off their telescreens for a bit. A huge luxury. Below them is the outer party, about 13%. That's Winston's group. They're the bureaucrats, the hands of the state, and they are watched more intensely than anyone. And then, at the bottom, making up a whopping 85% of the population, are the proles. The party mostly just ignores them, keeps them compliant with cheap entertainment. There's even a party slogan for it: proles and animals are free.
And the whole philosophy of this state, this absolute commitment to deception, is perfectly summed up in how the government is structured. Oceania is run by 4 ministries, and the names are just a masterclass in twisted irony. You've got the Ministry of Truth, which, of course, manufactures lies. The Ministry of Peace, it runs a perpetual war. The Ministry of Plenty manages constant shortages and starvation. And then there's the Ministry of Love, the one everyone is terrified of. That's the one that maintains order with torture and fear.
So how do they actually pull this off? How does the party keep everyone in line? Well, this brings us to one of Orwell's most brilliant and, frankly, most terrifying inventions: Newspeak. It's not about adding new words. It's about destroying them. Every year, the dictionary gets thinner. And the goal? Oh, it's chilling. The goal is to make thought crime, the very act of dissent, literally impossible. Because the words you would need to form that thought just don't exist anymore. I mean, if the word freedom is gone, how can you even conceive of being free? And to actually function in a world with Newspeak, you have to master this other little concept called doublethink. It's this insane mental gymnastics, the ability to hold 2 completely opposite ideas in your head at the exact same time and believe both of them. It's like just knowing that your chocolate ration was cut yesterday, but when the party says it's been increased today, you just accept it. You hold both truths. It's the complete and total shutdown of logic.
And if you want the perfect, most powerful example of doublethink in action, look no further than these 3 official slogans of the party. They're carved into buildings everywhere in Oceania, a constant in-your-face reminder that reality isn't what you see or feel. Reality is whatever the party tells you it is. Full stop.
Okay, so we've seen the giant, oppressive machine. Now let's zoom in. Let's look at the ghost in that machine. the story of one man, Winston Smith, and his doomed attempt to just reclaim a little piece of his own mind.
Winston's story unfolds in what's really a three-act tragedy. It all starts with the awakening, a tiny act of defiance. He buys a secret diary to write down his own thoughts, to create a record of a reality the party can't touch. From there, it escalates to rebellion. This is his affair with Julia, their desperate attempt to carve out a secret, private space just for themselves. And of course, it all ends in annihilation, when he's dragged to the Ministry of Love and systematically taken apart.
And you have to understand, Winston's first real crime, his original sin, wasn't something loud like writing down with Big Brother on a wall. No, it was quieter. It was the internal, stubborn belief that an objective truth exists, the simple, unshakable conviction that 2 + 2 = 4, no matter what the party says. In Oceania, that simple piece of math is the most dangerous idea you can have.
And if you want to know why that idea is so dangerous, just listen to this. These are the words of O'Brien, Winston's torturer, and they spell out the party's entire endgame. See, the party isn't interested in just killing its enemies. That's too easy. They want to convert them. The goal isn't power to achieve some kind of greater good. No, the goal is power for the sake of power. Pure, absolute domination over another person's mind.
This all leads to the horrifying climax of Winston's destruction, inside the infamous Room 101. In there, you're confronted with the one thing in the world you're most terrified of. For Winston, it's rats. And faced with that ultimate horror, he screams it. He begs them to do it to Julia instead of him. He betrays the only person he ever loved. And in that moment, it's over. His last piece of private loyalty, his humanity, is gone. The party has finally, completely won. And the book ends with perhaps one of the most devastating final lines in all of literature. Winston is cured. We see him sitting in a cafe, a hollowed-out man. He doesn't hate the people who broke him. He's filled with this pure, genuine love for the party and for Big Brother. The battle was over. He had won the victory over himself.
So, let's bring it back to our original question. Why does this story, written decades ago, still have the power to absolutely terrify us? It's because Orwell wasn't just spinning a yarn about some imaginary evil empire. He was holding up a mirror. He was sounding an alarm bell for our future and for our present.
I mean, you just have to look around. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Orwell's telescreens, these devices that watch and listen to you 24/7? Well, what about the smart speakers and phones we all carry in our pockets? The 2 minutes hate, this daily ritual of public rage directed at an enemy? It's not hard to see a reflection of that in the outrage cycles that are algorithmically fueled on social media. And the Ministry of Truth, constantly changing the past to fit the present? We hear echoes of that every time we talk about alternative facts or manufactured narratives.
And this is maybe the most important thing to get about the book. Orwell wasn't trying to be a psychic. He wasn't predicting the future. He was giving us a warning, a giant flashing red light about what could happen. What happens if we get complacent? We stop fighting for the very idea of objective truth. What happens when the language we use to control people completely overtakes the language we use to connect with them?
And so that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. The entire fight for Winston Smith's soul, for his very self, boiled down to a simple math problem. And it's a question that leaps right off the page and into our world today. Once we give up our shared objective reality, once we as a society lose the ability to agree that 2 + 2 = 4, what exactly have we lost?